Hey, my name's Ben Yenny, and I don't make movies. I help filmmakers make money from their movies. Today, I'm answering a viewer question from Travis James Ivy about how to vet investors and other filmmaking business partners. If you have your own question that you want to ask a producer's rep and distributor, go ahead and drop it in the comments, and I might just answer it in a video of its own. Let's get started. So first, we should examine why we vet. And the real answer to this is that when we start to make a film, we're basically committing to get into bed with somebody for 3 years or even longer, depending on the stakeholder. It might be as short as about a year if it's just a major producer or line producer, but if it's somebody who's going to be involved financially, it is going to be closer to 3 to even 7 years. So if you get into bed with the wrong person, it can cost you a whole lot. It can even cost you the film if they are a really bad bet of a person. And we vet in order to prove that they are legitimate and can do everything they say they can do. It's just doing your due diligence. So, your vetting will vary based on who you are looking to do business with. The way you vet an investor is different from the way you vet a distributor, is different from the way you vet a director, is different from the way you vet a star. And the reason for this is best illustrated by a quote from The Art of War. If one knows neither their position nor their enemy's position, they will succumb in every battle they face. One who knows only their position, but not their enemy's position, for every victory they shall suffer a defeat. If one knows both their position and their enemy's position, they need not fear the results of 100 battles. And again, that's Sun Tzu in The Art of War. So with that in mind, how you vet different potential partners depends on the power dynamics of the relationship. So we're going to go over how to vet each of these 8 different types of stakeholders in your film. Investors, producers, reps, sales agents, distributors, producers, directors, directors of photography, and cast. But before we do that, we're going to go over the basic vetting tactics you can use. And we're going to break those into 3 stages. First, what you should do before you meet with them or have a long, in-depth phone conversation. This can be done after you meet them for the first time if you meet them at a networking event or convention like the American Film Market, EFM, or Con. Then we're going to look at what you can do during the conversation and immediately afterwards. And finally, what you should do after you meet with them, but before you sign anything with them. So this is going to sound super complicated and kind of completely out of the blue, but the first thing you should do when vetting somebody is Google them. Just type their name into Google and see what comes up. You'd be surprised what can come up sometimes. Some of the biggest warning flags can come up immediately when you're Googling someone. I've started to do due diligence and seen that a potential, I think this was an investor, had a couple of pending lawsuits for sexual harassment against them. They were dismissed from the pile as of that time. But most of the time, you won't really find a lot here. You'll just find some of the other places that you should be going anyway to check up on them for. Vetting their professional credentials is a huge thing here. You should look at what they have on IMDb. If you're talking to investors, you should look at their angel list and their slated profiles if you're looking for an independent film investor. They may not have a slated profile, but if they've worked as an investor in tech, they will almost certainly have a slated or a Crunchbase profile. And of course, you should look at their own personal website, because everybody of prominence tends to have one these days. After that, you should look at their social media. Take a look at their LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube channel, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, or Tumblr. Now, they don't need all of these, and what you're looking for can vary a bit platform to platform and stakeholder to stakeholder, but in general, you're pretty much always looking for the tone of what they tend to post, as well as what mutual contacts you have, if any. And if they actually happen to have a YouTube channel of their own, looking at their the total number of their subscribers, as well as the general sorts of videos they post and what else they've liked, is generally a good barometer to start with. The size and scale of their social media following is much more important for certain stakeholders than others. The connections and connections in common are more important for people like distributors and investors, although distributors, you also want to have a pretty decent scale there. But it is also important, but it's more important for casts to have large Twitter followings, a large YouTube following, or have prominence on Insta, Snapchat, or TikTok, which is new but growing rapidly. So that's what you should be doing before you get to the meeting, particularly the social media stuff and the web search stuff, because you can actually bring up some of those things in a meeting. If there's something that isn't completely terrible, but you find it while you're researching them, it's a very good thing to bring it up if it's at all concerning, or if you just found something interesting that you can relate to them on. That can also make the meeting go smoother in general. When you get this first meeting, as an aside, it's important to realize that it's probably not your only meeting. You probably won't get the desired outcome from whatever the stakeholder is on that first meeting, and in fact, it can be worse if you do than if you don't. But a couple things to keep your eyes open for while you're in this meeting with them are a couple of things you can look at when you're doing this are to look at what they're drinking. It doesn't necessarily mean are they drinking booze or coffee, or more what sort of coffee they're drinking or what sort of tea they're drinking. It's not necessarily a sign of affluence, but it can be a good way to strike up a conversation and start to establish a rapport. And you should also be looking at how they're dressed, not necessarily for how expensively they're dressing, but whether they're repping the stakeholder's uniform that you're looking for. Affluence varies very much region to region, so there are a lot of places like Colorado where you wouldn't ever meet somebody in a business suit, or at least you're unlikely to, but you may very well meet somebody in North Face attire, and that is generally what the affluent in that area wear. When you get into the conversation, it's best to start out by just getting into the conversation in a simple way. When you get into this conversation, it's best to start talking about the weather and just establishing a rapport, but after a few minutes of that, dive straight into why you met. Talk about your project, talk about why you want them involved, and what in that diligence that you did, again, made you really want to have a meeting with them, and what you think they can bring to the table. You should also take a look at their shoes. Shoes are a great sign of affluence, and what they're driving and what their watch is. Not necessarily looking for a Rolex, but if there's somebody who has a lot of tech on their resume, you probably would be expecting to see a smartwatch of some kind. Things like that. So after you've had the meeting, assuming it went well, you'll want to look more at their previous work as well as who they've worked with. If they are a creative person, you should actually watch their previous work to make sure it's a fit for what you're looking for. This is particularly important for directors of photography and cast. And finally, you should actually call their references. Don't ask people for their references. Just look them up on IMDb Pro and call them. Or, if they're an investor or someone else, call some of the people they've invested in before. As a note, for just asking for references as opposed to just calling people, I'm pretty sure there was one time a sales agent that is no longer around that I worked with that just did different voices on a call and used various VoIPs when I was calling him. So again, now that we've gone over the basic tactics of this, we're going to look at the specific tactics you use in each individual case. Starting with unknown cast. If they're unknown, they should have to audition for your film. That's it. You should also look at their reel and previous work. If they're just starting out, they might not have an extensive reel, but they should have some level of reel. Especially if you're casting for some level of feature or television series or even longer running web series. You should look at their social media. You're looking at it a bit for their the size of their following, but you're also looking at it to make sure you're not going to run into a really bad scandal, which is unlikely on the small independent film scale. But you should also be looking at it as a tone of how these people are likely to be on set. And finally, you should look at the references from people they've worked with in the past, particularly directors they've worked with in the past. If it's their very first project ever, you can give them a chance, but you might want to be hesitant on it. And when I say very first project, again, assuming that you're casting for a feature, you probably want somebody who's acted in at least several shorts. Vetting known cast is a bit of a different animal. First, you want to look at their previous work. If you're producing or directing an independent film, you probably won't have the power to make them audition. You should also look at the demographic that they jive with most, like who actually follows them on Twitter, who do they have the most appeal among. As an example, Mark Harmon, who is the star of NCIS, has a very different audience that he resonates with than, say, John Oliver or Miley Cyrus. You should look at their social media. This time you are looking at following, but also for you're looking for engagement. Engagement is a much more real metric than just the number of followers they have, and you get that by looking at their actual posts and seeing who's clicking it, liking it, all of that sort of stuff. You should look into their international bankability, and the best way to do that is to talk to a sales agent or distributor if you already have one. But you can get a little bit of an idea of it from the IMDb Star Meter, which is going to be the one that is directly after their interviews and press. If they are notable, they should have some level of press around them, and they should have done a decent number of interviews. It's amazing what you can find out, and when you're doing this research at an early stage, you might actually be able to put it into your offer letter that would make them more likely to sign on to your project. So again, the final thing is the IMDb star rating. It's a very imperfect metric, but it might be one of the most relevant you can get. Especially since the influence from the star rating is changed based on who's actually looking at your project. And if their star meter recently took a pretty big spike, it might be because some big studio people are looking at that person. That happened with a project I worked on. So for DPs, the big thing you want to do is their reel in their previous work. Their social media, you want a little bit on engagement here, but I wouldn't ever expect a DP to really do a lot of promotion. I've never seen one do it. If you are that sort of DP, that's great, but most don't. You're also looking here for how what they tend to post and to see if there's going to be some level of liability risk if they're on set. And finally, call their references. See above for more info. Vetting unknown directors. Similar to cast, start with their reel and previous work, then move on to their social media. Call their references. If you're a producer, you should be calling other producers they've worked with. You want to know if they got in on time and on budget, and just how they were to work with on set. You really want to know that they have the ability to work with actors and pull performances out, just because that's the biggest part of this that is only their job. And you'll also want to take a look at some of their writing samples, because most directors will have to have some level of say on the writing and potentially rewriting on the fly. When you're vetting known directors, again, as with known cast, you start with their previous work. Then you move on to their financial track record. You want to see what films they've done before and how they did financially. If they've only done 4 features, but they were all micro budgets and they never really made much money back, they're probably not a good bet for a $50 million feature. In fact, in some cases like that, you might be better off with some people who have done some really influential shorts. You want to see if their track record in the same genre is strong, particularly if it's a very niche genre, like the LGBT subgenre or the faith-based subgenre, or if they're just, or if they've made a bunch of really gory horror movies, maybe they're not the best bet for your family picture. The international bankability has more to do with genre, and it's of less importance for a director than it is for the star, but it is something to look into, and most of the way that the sales agents would derive that is from the track record and their genre and their financial track record, everything I mentioned before. However, if you have a letter of intent from a sales agent, you do want to run potential new directors by them. You want to see if they've worked with recognizable name talent before, because they may be able to get those same people or some of their friends back more easily if they have. Then you want to look at their social media. This is, as with known talent, it is also for engagement, size, as well as trying to suss out if there's likely to be a scandal in the near future from poor social interaction. And finally, you'll want to look for press and interviews like you would with known casts. They'll probably be harder to find for directors than they were with cast, but you can get a good idea of their personality and how they are to work with from those, although they are, for lack of a better word, sanitized. Producers. Number 1, you want to look for connections to money. Shocking that. You want to look at their financial track record for the same reasons that we talked about with directors, except it's even more important. Call their references. Look at their previous work. See if they have connections to talent and crew. And look at their social media. This is equal parts for sales, because the producers are actually going to be a huge part of your sales force, especially for smaller independent films, smaller meaning less than $1 million. And then if they have a track record in the genre, that's a big bonus, but it's not as necessary as it is for a director. Distributors. When you're vetting a distributor, you want to keep in mind that it's probably not a huge issue if you're selling your film yourself. Most of the time, distributors would much rather deal with sales agents or producers reps. But in the event you do find yourself in a situation where you are dealing with a distributor, because there are some that do deal with directly with filmmakers, here's what you should be looking out for. What are the deal points? What's the term of the film? What's their cut? What are they paying you up front, if anything? Things. What territories are they looking for? What rights are they looking for? Those are the big things to look out for. You'll also want to understand what deliverables you need they will need from you in order to get the film out there. You'll also want to make sure that they have a strong history of paying people on time. Call their references. This is really important. It's the only way you're going to find out their history of payments accurately. And finally, you do want to look at their social media. You want to see what sorts of films they've done. And you also want to look at the reviews for other films they've done on social media. Because if your distributor is selling films as things they're not, it probably won't look well on you. Next up, we have sales agents. First, as with any salesperson, you want to look at what films they've sold or what products they've sold. You also want to look at the deal points, the same ones I mentioned before, but just for ease of finding that information, those big ones are the term, the revenue split, and what MG you're getting, if any, what their recoupable expenses are, and you'll want to look, but for ease of finding that, you want to look at the term of the contract, their revenue split, and MG, if any, minimum guarantee, if any, their recoupable expenses, and the territories they're looking for. There are some other points you'll need to look at there, but those are the really basic ones, and I should be doing another video on the overall structure of a deal that you can look for at that time. You also want to ask who they're direct with. This means who do they actually have direct relationships with that they sell to on a consistent and regular basis. You'll want to call their references and make sure they pay on time. Again, references is how you find that out. And you'll also want to know what their delivery items are going to need to be. And finally, you need to know what markets they attend. They need to attend, at very least, the American film market and Cannes, as of right now. It's better if they also attend Hong Kong, and if you're doing anything other than an action movie or horror movie or family movie, you probably want them to attend the European film market as well. And finally, you want to look at their social media and press. Hopefully they'll have a lot of press, if they're doing their job right. Because one of the biggest sales agents' contributions to a film's marketing campaign is by their... Because hopefully they're going to have a lot of press. One of the biggest contributions for a sales agent in terms of marketing is their publicist and their press. If they don't have a lot of it, you can infer that they're not going to do a lot to market your film. And we're getting on to the meat of the matter here, vetting investors. Yes, you do need to vet investors. It's not just give me a check and go away. First of all, most investors wouldn't agree to that. Second, if they did, you might want to be wary if you don't already have a deep personal relationship with them. When you're looking for an investor, you want to find out where they got their money. This is more just making sure they're real than anything else. But there are some other concerns if they actually have money but got it in a less than reputable way. You want to look at their professional profiles, the same ones we mentioned before: AngelList, LinkedIn, Slated, and Crunchbase if they're in tech. You want to find out if they've actually invested in film, because it's its own beast, and if they haven't, they may be a bit of a handful to deal with. You want to find out if they have the ability to bring more than money. If they're a tested executive producer, they may be able to help you with marketing and or distribution, and those would be very, very useful for you, especially as a younger or earlier stage filmmaker, earlier stage in your career, I mean. If they talk about needing to move money, that's a sign that they're real. If they talk about having money coming in, unless they live in San Francisco and were an early employee at, say, Uber, and this conversation was going on earlier this year, money coming in is not necessarily a good sign and could be a whole load of horse hockey. I would say something else, but I am trying to monetize this channel at some point. And finally, how you vet a producer's rep. And I'll give you as much information about vetting me as you might need, although honestly, you should verify everything I'm about to say here. But here it is, straight from the mouth of a producer's rep, as many producers' reps are not everything they say they are. So you want to look at what films they've sold. My biggest titles are Goodland, Luna de Cigares, also known as Segeda Moon. The Devil's Restaurant was the release title. It was the restaurant when I got it. Then there's The Cutlass, another film called Narco Hitman in the US and Still Alive internationally, and Paralytic when I got my hands on it. Those are the biggest ones. You can also find those on my IMDb. Who are they direct with? I would rather not say this publicly, because some of the people I'm direct with might not like it. If you email me, I'll tell you when we eventually get to the call stage. Do they charge up front? In general, no producer's rep should ever charge you up front for brokering tasks. I do not charge for brokering tasks, and when I'm acting solely as a producer's rep, I do not charge recoupable expenses either. When I'm distributing the film directly, I do charge some level of recoupable expenses, and my commission is different than when I'm a producer's rep. However, when I act as an early stage consultant or producer of marketing and distribution, I do take some level of a fee. However, I generally defer a significant portion of that fee. Did they watch your movie? If it's something you're asking them about for directing, or for brokering, rather, they definitely should watch your movie. I generally tend to. I have never actually picked up a film that I didn't watch. And also, I will watch 20 minutes of basically everything that's submitted to me, unless there are huge top-level quality concerns in the first 20 minutes or copyright concerns that I won't be able to sell the film with. I will not watch it if that's the case. What's their commission? As a producer's rep, when I liaise directly with U.S. distributors, if I'm not doing it myself, that's 18%. When I'm working with getting you the best international sales agent and negotiating that deal, that's 10%. And can they help with press? Yes. Not as much as I can all the time, but I do have a pretty good set of press people that I work with there. So I know I just dropped a lot of information on you, and it's probably a bit too much to really consider for just... So I know I just dropped a lot of information on you, and it's going to be hard to remember all of it, and you probably don't want to have to scrub through this video to find out each individual stakeholder. Lucky for you, if you support me on Patreon, you'll actually be able to get this deck and all my other video decks when the videos drop for only $5 a month. You'll also get a lot of other bonuses, including exclusive live streams, links in my blogs and this video, and videos like this, and even more. Check it out. So, having said all of that, the real bottom line of vetting somebody is this: trust your gut. Now, I don't mean to sound like a noir detective here, but your gut is actually your body interpreting signals from your subconscious about information that you may not have consciously picked up on. So, trusting your gut can be a good shorthand to figure out that maybe you don't want to work with this person, even if you don't totally know why yet. That why may well become more clear later. But if you're hesitant about someone, trust your gut and start to try to figure out why you're hesitant about those people. So thank you so much for watching. And if you like this and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button and slam that notification bell to make sure you get updates when I drop a video, which I'm trying to do every Monday right now, but I'm a busy guy and content is not my primary job. My primary job is actually working with filmmakers and representing them. So if you want me to help you with your film directly, submit it via the link below or the button right over there. Or if you just want to see more content like that and want me to keep putting out content like that, hit that Patreon button. And finally, comments really do help with the YouTube algorithm. So, have you ever been bitten by not vetting someone?